Hi, everyone, and welcome to our other talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. You may be familiar with our regular Sunday talks within the Nine-Sided Circle. Consider this an expansion on that. We are going to be doing one extra talk, one Sunday a month. That's going to be every third Sunday morning. And this is going to be a talk that allows us to invite our European, African, Middle Eastern, South Asian, those folks into our circle to join us live, to be able to participate just as our Australian and North American and South American members and friends do. So thank you so much for joining us if you're able to make it. And if you're watching on YouTube, just know that the opportunity is there for you to join us if this is a time that works for you. So this is 10:30 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time currently on the third Sunday of every month. Cool. So,
yeah, and that's 6:30 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time, so you can figure out your time from there.
Yep. And you can sign up for our mailing list if you want to participate in that, just as you would for the regular Sunday talk. And likewise, you can join us on the Facebook forum. That's
All
the
links for
Nine-Sided
those
Circle
things will be
forum.
below.
All of that is in the description below. Yep.
Keep them talking for a second.
Me?
You.
Keep talking for a second?
Keep talking, yes.
All right. So it's going to be the same format as we do for our Sunday talks. As I said, this is just an expanded opportunity for more people to participate with us. And that is going to mean that this is both a teaching time and a conversational time. You can ask questions, you can ask for clarification, you can share a relevant anecdote, you can contribute to the teaching in real time. Anything you want to add, Mishtak? Oh, I think he's plugging in his headset. There we go. So, what that means is for this one Sunday a month, we have to think of two topics to share with you. They're going to be two different topics because, again, we don't want to do a repeat that people have to sit through if they're watching on YouTube. And we think that our folks who are joining us for this other talk deserve to have fresh content of their own. And that makes this exciting for us because we have to stretch out of our comfort zone in order to try out this new thing that we're doing. It means doing a little bit more work, but it's going to be worthwhile.
Yep. And to that end, should you have a topic that you would like us to discuss, you can always tell us, and most likely we will do it because coming up with topics is hard.
It is. And yet we so often are inspired by conversations with one-on-one students, conversations we have on Facebook, things that we talk about in real life with, well, this is all real life, right? But, just day-to-day things tend to inspire us. And if anything comes up for you guys that you feel inspired by, feel free to share with us and we will see what we can do to shape a talk out of it if it seems like something that we would feel good about covering.
Yeah, Nancy has given us, God, I don't know how many topics, plenty of topics, yes.
And I think part of this talk was inspired by a conversation this week you had with Wild, right?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, oh, we can talk about that.
There you go. Yep.
So okay. Shall we dive right in? Or do we have to do the
We still have to do the unfortunate YouTube spiel.
So. Okay. Hang on for the unfortunate YouTube spiel. We would love it. We would love it if you who are watching this on YouTube would consider subscribing to our channel. You don't have to. You could just come in and watch our videos and it's okay. But if you subscribe to the channel, wonderful things happen, such as you can get notified when we put up new videos. And all you have to do is down here, you hit the subscribe and the bell, and then you can hit the thumbs up. we love it when you hit the thumbs up, because it moves us up in the ratings of YouTube, and their algorithm loves us and everything. So yeah, hit a thumbs up, unless you hate what we're doing, and then you can hit the thumbs down, which is the hate button. You know, we have the like button, the hate button. And there's
Yep.
one guy who conscientiously
Consistently,
hates
yeah.
most of our videos, and I'm happy with that. If you're not upsetting somebody, you're not doing the work right.
It's kind of inspiring, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a couple of you we've met through people just finding our videos randomly, and that means that the algorithm is working, and we get to connect because of the good targeting of the algorithm. So please do participate, and we'll get to connect with more people like you.
And make comments. We love your comments.
Leave comments, yeah.
Yes.
We've had some really amazing comments, some really good conversations, and we hope to see more of that. It's really increased over the past few months, and we appreciate that a lot. Okay, I think that's pretty much it, right, for the spiel?
That's the spiel. Thank you for sitting through it. We appreciate it. We don't like it any more than you do, but
we really don't, to be honest. We just know that it's part of the trade. All right, so today our fascinating, amazing topic is going to be covering the Enneagram of Information Degradation. There we go. We are going to be inspired by the work of Ibn Khaldun, and what we're going to be doing is drawing upon his text in order to plot out the Enneagram that we're going to be talking about today. So, Mushtaq,
yes.
Why don't you get us started?
Okay, let me tell you a couple of things about Ibn Khaldun. He was to the Islamic world what Da Vinci was to the Christian world. He was a polymath. He was a scientist, an artist, a great thinker, and one of the people who really pushed the sciences, and especially the social sciences, which was interesting at the time, you know, because you had all of these guys who were doing optics and mathematics and all of this kind of stuff. But Ibn Khaldun did social science really, really good. And he talked about how, for lack of a better translation, I translate it as information because I think that that is a better term than how it's mostly translated. And he gave 7 aphorisms about how information degrades. And the value of this is that you can apply this first to yourself. And it should be applied first to yourself so that you can check yourself and go, how accurate is my information and how is it being distorted in different ways according to these, he considered them almost natural laws of information transmission. And then you can use the same technology to check incoming signals, as we like to say. And that's really important because these days, there is so much disinformation flying around, and we have not been taught the technology for the most part to tell the difference, which is why here in America, you have all of these people who are QAnon followers, which is fairly frightening because from a logical, normal, healthy point of view, you look at this stuff and go, this is completely insane. And maybe a quarter of the population is buying into it. How does this happen? Well, Ibn Khaldun knows how it happened and is willing to help us understand. And we are going to use an Enneagram in order to more deeply understand this, which is kind of the fun part. So let me share a screen with you. And this will probably take a moment to load on everybody's computers. Let me know when you see it.
I'm seeing it over here.
Okay.
Give a thumbs up if you guys are seeing it on your end. Okay, good. Thanks, Wyatt.
Excellent. So I'm calling this the Enneagram of Information Degradation, because this is not how information is transmitted. This is how information is ruined. And first, we're just going to go around the circle. At point 0, which is also point 9, we have Ibn Khaldun's statement. By the way, down at the bottom of this, you see his name and the book that he wrote, which is still in existence. Unlike so many of the great tomes of the past, you can find this, and you can find this in English translation. And it's an okay translation. It's readable.
What do we need to know about that text?
It was written in the late 1300s Common Era, and it covers everything. It is a huge text, and it covers all of his social theories at the time. It's a brilliant work, and worth taking a look at. So, point 0, the entering point of this Enneagram, is realizing that all information, by its very nature, is liable to error. And then we look at what that means. And let's take a look at the first error. The first of these errors is partisanship towards a creed or opinion. So, think about this. You are a Democrat or a Republican. You are a Sunni or a Shiite. You are a Catholic or a Protestant. All of these things are going to bend the way information presents itself to you. And this is a natural occurrence.
Kind of like a prism, in a sense.
Yeah. Everybody tends to filter their sense of information through their partisanship. And it's everywhere. So you do martial arts and you say, my system is better than your system, obviously. You know, it's more effective. It's better on the street. And then the other person is going to say, no, it's not. And then you fight on the internet about it.
That's where the real action happens, right?
Yeah. The real action happens on the internet, where everybody can lie about everything. And that gets us to the second of the errors. And we're going to go around the circle first, and then we're going to look at what the lines tell us. Because what the lines tell us is really quite important. The second error is overconfidence in one's sources. And this often means, okay, there's a weird phenomena. The first thing that you learn about a subject, especially if it's written, is going to be what you tend to believe about that subject forever. So back when I was a young fellow, I ran across a book. It was called The Third Eye, written by a fellow who went by the name of Tuesday Lobsang Rampa, who was a Tibetan monk and had come to the West to teach us all cool Tibetan stuff. Except that, as it turns out, he was actually this British gardener who took a bunch of theosophical stuff and cobbled it together and told a really amusing story about being an incarnated Tibetan monk who came to the West. But there are still people today who believe that this book has anything to do with real stuff, even though they can talk with actual Tibetan monks now and find out that this guy didn't know anything about what he was talking about.
Right. And this happens pretty, not infrequently. Stuff just like this.
Ubiquitously is the word that we want. By the way, I know that English is not the first language of everybody here. If we use a word that you don't understand, please stop us and ask us to define it for you, because
yes, absolutely.
it's important that you actually know what we are saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's also true if you do speak English, because
of course, yeah, definitely. There's no reason to feel ashamed about that. You can also type it out in the chat and I'll get to it as soon as I'm able to, or Mushtaq will, depending.
And so one's sources have to be constantly checked. If we have time, we'll talk about the 3 levels of certainty today. I'd love to get into that.
That would be good. Let's see what we can do.
Yeah. Then we get to the 3rd point. The 3rd error is the failure to understand what is intended by the originator of the information. This is really important, because you're going to, and by you, I mean the general you, not anybody here, because none of you guys would do this. But generally, people will miss the originator's meaning and apply their own considerations to it. Here in America, the classic thing that I see all the time is people attempting to interpret the poetry of Jalaluddin Rumi. And
that is such a big one.
That's such a big one. And first of all, most people who are doing this do not read Persian at all. And it was all written in Persian. Secondly, the translations that they use are oftentimes not translations, but so-called interpretations, which means a poet gets hold of Nicholson's or Arbery's translations and then rewrites it to make it sound more poetic like they want it to. And every time that happens, the person's presuppositions sneak in to the writing. So we miss what the writer intended by his message or her message.
Or their message.
Or their message. The 4th error is a mistaken presupposition about the truth.
There's a reminder for Mushtaq.
And that's to remind me to always remember that the truth is real. So, what does this mean? Think about, I'm going to give you 2 terms that were at one time scientific terms. One is ether, and the other is phlogiston. Phlogiston sounds like a place somewhere in Central Asia that you might go to find the Sarmun Temple, but it's not. So ether, up until the late 19th century, was a theoretical substance through which energy like light traveled. Because scientists at the time could not conceive of something moving through a vacuum. Phlogiston is a theoretical substance that is connected to all forms of combustion. And it is a fluid that exists, so that things can burn. And up until the late 19th century, all science were based on these 2 presuppositions, neither of which turned out to be true. The Michelson-Morley experiment put the end to ether, except with theosophists who still think it exists. And I forget the name of the experiment that disproved phlogiston, but it's out there. So the first error the first presupposition that we make about the truth is that we know it. And the more we think we know the absolute truth, the less we do as a rule. So the fifth error, and this is a fun one, the fifth error is the inability to place information in its real context. Now I'm going to get all religious here for a second, because this is where this became really apparent to me. So when I was a young fellow, I would visit Christian churches, and everybody would quote from the scriptures, and it would oftentimes be one line. And they would use that one line to mean what they wanted it to mean. Then my teacher sent me to study Quran. And my Quran teacher said, no, you can't do it that way. You have to understand the context of each surah. You can't just quote something out of context and expect it to mean anything. You have to understand the context in which it was given, where it was given, when it was given, and to whom it was given. If you don't understand these things, you are not going to understand this book. And it occurred to me, oh my God, I could apply this to everything. You know, that context can be everything.
Do you feel like it is everything or just can be everything?
It can be everything. There are these other areas too, but this is a big one.
Okay.
The inability to place any information in its real context. And we used to, it's gotten better in most places now, but in the here in America, there was a lot of fundamentalist Christian anti-Muslim stuff going on for a number of years. And one of the things that they used to pull out to prove that the people they didn't like were terrible, no good people, was a not even a whole verse from the Quran, but it basically said, strike the infidels wherever you find them. Now, the context of this is after, 20 years of the Meccans raiding Muhammad's caravans and hurting his people and generally making a mess of things because they didn't like him and they were losing money. And Muhammad holding his hand for all of this time and not getting in a fight with people who were family and friends and neighbors.
Literally family.
Literally. After years of this, finally, he gets the message, okay, you have done everything you can to not fight these people. Now you fight these people. And it goes on after that, but it was specifically directed to the Meccans of the time. It wasn't all unbelievers everywhere. It was the Meccans. And what you get if you understand the context of this is use a lot of patience and try everything else before you get into a fight with anybody. But if you take it out of context, it can be distorted into anything.
Yeah, I see Wal has unmuted. Did you want to share something?
Yes, please.
Yes, in addition to that particular verse, I do recall that there's a part in the same portion that says, yes, to mean, yes, you do have to stand up for yourself now, but even then have mercy. Even then, if you can spare them, spare them. But if you can't, then it's just time for you to stand up for yourself. So again, that completely gets taken out of context, and they take one or two words that serve their purpose and completely forget that even when a person has to engage, to stand up for their truth, to stand up for their dignity, to stand up for just their right to live and breathe like a normal human being, even then you have to have the control to be merciful if they allow you to. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you for that, because that's important. We get to the sixth error. By the way, anybody can comment on anything at any time, just so as you know, or ask questions. The sixth error.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if people are feeling shy because this is your first time being here, it's okay, but we're going to get you talking at some point.
Yep.
There you go. Okay.
So be afraid. The sixth error is one that we see here in the States all the time. We see it everywhere. And this is, in some ways, a fundamental error, which is why it's at this point. The sixth error is the common desire to gain favor of those of high ranks by distorting information so as to please them.
This is such a big one.
This is, you got to learn this one. This boils down to an axiom that we have within the nine-sided circle, which is true communication can only happen between equals. The servant will always tell the master what the master wants to hear. The master will always believe what the servant told him rather than the truth. We just went through 4 years of that here in this country with the sad emergence of Donald Trump, who is somebody who had to be told every day how good he was doing, no matter how bad he was doing. Literally, it was kind of frightening how his ego needed to be fed, and it hurt everybody because he didn't know the truth. I don't know what he would have done had he known the truth. But he didn't, because everybody had to lie to him, because if they didn't, he would fire them. He thought he was still on that TV show. So this is a fundamental principle that we use within the nine-sided circle, which is everybody here is an equal. There are no gurus, there are no masters, unless everybody's a guru and a master, and that's fine. Oh God. People who cannot get into their car without setting off the alarm are not going to be allowed near the airlocks when we finally get into space. Thank you. So, this is important in every level of one's life. It is particularly important in personal relationships. Would you like to say something about that, Noor? That's kind of your specialty.
Yeah, I mean, we hear time and time again that if you're building any relationship, whether it's a friendship, to some extent a parent-child relationship, certainly a romantic relationship, on ass covering and general dishonesty, it's going to like totally undermine the quality of the relationship you could have from the very beginning. And there's something to be said about finding ways to tell people the truth in a way that they can receive it. And what that means is you don't deny the truth, you don't try to hide it, but you share it with grace. And this is a critical skill for all of us to try to develop.
Yeah.
What else should I say about that?
What else should you say about that?
I don't know. Carry on. I'll think of something.
without this one thing, there is no human adulthood.
Mhm.
There is no true communication.
Right.
There is no ability to actually interact with people at the level of essence. You can only interact with people at the level of personality.
Yeah. Hmm.
And that's why this sits at this particular point on the Enneagram, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
The seventh, it says, the seventh and most important error is the ignorance of the laws governing the transformation of human society. This is a big one because most of us don't even know what that means anymore. I had to read the Muqadimmah probably 3 times before I really began to get a sense of what he was meaning by the transformations of human society. And yet, human society is mechanical. You know, maybe in Shambhala, somewhere high in the Himalayas, there is a conscious and intentional society, but there is no country that I know of where society is not mechanical. Even the really interesting ones like New Zealand. New Zealand is pretty cool as a country, but their culture is mechanical. Definitely here in the United States. Probably where you live. Though I would be willing to be wrong about these things. So it behooves us, if we want true communication, to understand how the laws governing the transformation of human society work. Can anybody think of a law that governs the transformation of human society? Chris?
Not a specific law, but a dynamic at play, which is language.
Okay.
And so, yeah, is there within the book, does it talk about language at all? Is that ever a specific issue or no?
Not specifically as I remember. Though the language of the book is important. It's in Arabic, and so you can say things in Arabic that you can't say in other languages, which is kind of cool. But that's true of a lot of languages.
Right. And part of the culture and part of.
Yeah.
And what scale are we talking about within these laws?
We are talking
universal?
about universal, basically, yeah. So one of the laws of the transformations of human society is bureaucracy will rise to fill all empty niches.
That's so good. 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 Yeah. If I may, just the understanding the power of informality within certain dynamics and the negative effects and the adverse possibilities of creating more structure around informality within human dynamics is a fascinating point. And I think you're really shedding some light here when you talk about the bureaucracy filling those niches, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another law of transformation for human society is that politicians will make laws until everything is either mandatory or forbidden.
Gotta fill in all those
Yeah,
gray areas.
that's what a politician does, is that they make
Yeah.
laws. They are elected to go make laws, and then they spend their tenure in whatever place they are making the laws, changing the laws, finding better ways to transform the laws so you get more law. And the ultimate point of that is everything is either mandatory or forbidden. We saw that during the reign of the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. That's the last time I can think of that happening, where literally everything not mandatory is forbidden.
Ugh.
And the punishment for doing anything forbidden or being anything forbidden was death for the most part.
Yikes.
Yeah, it was, people don't realize quite how terrible that time was in that country.
So I did see that Weil and Michael unmuted themselves at some point. So I
Yes.
would love to invite you guys to share.
Tell us things.
Yeah, well, you first.
I don't know whether it is directly related to this point at point number 7, but I just found myself reflecting upon something that I think Imam Ali once said about society, particularly correctional facilities. I know in the States, prisons are pretty packed.
Mhm.
We love
And
prisons here.
Yeah, what I remember is when a society is developed to a certain stage, you don't need prisons. You don't need somebody else telling you you've been bad. You sit here for however long. It's actually self-imposed, and the time of isolation is a time of correction. So it's just something that came to mind, and just reminds me of how very far we are, I think, globally from that. A prison is something that robs, whereas I think what Imam Ali was saying with a society that has evolved to a certain extent is that it's actually time out for you to regain, to get something, as opposed to have something snatched away. I just wanted to share that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's true. The United States, excuse me, is a really good example of this, because we put everybody in prison. We have more prisons and more people in prison than any other country on the planet. We make Russia look liberal when it comes to prisons. And our prisons they're not as terrible as, say, South Africa, but they're pretty terrible. And getting more so, as opposed to a country, say, Sweden, that doesn't lock people up too often. And when they do, they lock them up in humane conditions and feed them edible food and do everything that they can to reform them. And I think the recidivism rate between Sweden and America is like astronomical for how many people go back to prison here and how few people go back to prison there.
Well, the background of our prison system gets into all kinds of systemic issues we have here in the U.S.,
including slavery.
Exactly. Like it's a different form of slavery in that you have people doing manual work for pennies, basically.
And that's written into our Constitution.
Exactly.
Yeah. When we did away with slavery, that was except in cases where we put somebody in prison.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Kind of embarrassing.
Yeah, and it's hard to get out from under that once you're in what we call the prison pipeline. So, okay.
And that gets to another one of the laws governing the transformations of human society, which is those on the top will do everything possible to enslave those on the bottom. And there are a lot of different kinds of slavery. You have debt slavery, you have work slavery, you have actual chattel slavery, you have serfdom, you have all of that. But all societies tend to move towards this when they are working mechanically.
Before we go any further,
yes?
Is it okay if we make a moment? I want to make sure people get to talk if they'd like to.
All
Michael,
right.
did you have anything
Let me get rid of this
share?
real quick. And let's talk to people. Okay, who had things to say?
I've got one, which is the law or the point mentions the transformations, plural, of human society.
Yes.
Does this include positive as well as negative transformations?
Yes. You can have positive transformations in society, but only if that society has done work to limit its mechanicalness.
Mm.
What would be an example of that happening?
Universal healthcare is an example of that happening. Universal healthcare. For those of you who don't live in America, we have this thing here called for-profit healthcare. So if you have money, you can get healthcare. If you don't, you're screwed. I know it sounds bizarre. It sounds strange to anybody who lives in a sane country, but the movement towards universal healthcare is a movement away from the entropy of mechanical society and towards the syntropy of everybody deserving to have a basic level of protection in their existence. So that's what comes to mind first. And we could probably argue about that, but I would be right. So why bother?
Such a smart ass.
I am a smart ass. I'm good at being a smart ass. Was that useful, Nancy?
Yeah, I'm not going to say the complete abolition of slavery because there's still quite a bit left, but even making slavery not normal and not respectable was an improvement.
Yeah, and we've seen this in a number of different places. I'm going to go, since I've been talking a lot about Muhammad, Muhammad hated slavery and he wanted to get rid of it. And it was very important to him, but he lived in a society where he couldn't just say, all right, slavery is outlawed, all the slaves are free. So he did this really sneaky thing. He said, okay, you have done this sin and you must make penance. And you can fast for a month. You can give all sorts of alms, or you could free a slave. And they say that by the time of his death in Medina, there were basically no slaves anymore because, and there were supposedly even people who would sell themselves into slavery so that they could be freed. So somebody could do their penance without having to like fast for a month or 2 months. Little bits of history that we don't know about.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, when a society starts going, no, all human beings are worthy of freedom, it is moving towards syntropy. And that again goes against the mechanical nature of society.
Louisa, did you have thoughts you wanted to share? I saw you unmuted.
Yeah, I was thinking about maybe control is one of those mechanisms that society or certain groups of people in society try to control more and more aspects of other people's lives in their own favor, kind of. I feel
Yes.
like, yeah.
Say more. What do you notice? This is important stuff, and I'm glad
Like
that you brought
whole
it up.
bureaucracy thing and making more and more laws and
Mm-hmm.
controlling every aspect of a citizen's life isn't also that also happens in dictatorships and any kind of non-democratic, non-free countries and systems. Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. And then also maybe expansion, that everything has to grow and expand, and for example, economy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
All of this is
Unbridled
absolutely
growth.
correct. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Louisa. That's smart stuff. And I'm glad that you brought it up because all of that is important. Expansion is, that's where we get to point 8 on this. So let me pull this up again. And so here at 7 completes the octave of this. So we have do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, here's C, and that goes back to do at a higher octave. But at 8, we have other areas of degradation are discovered.
Yeah, I'm curious about this one.
Yeah, this one is because we know that we don't know everything, we can discover stuff. So as Louisa mentioned, expansion is an important aspect of society. I think we just lost somebody. Hopefully they'll make it back.
I think it was Chris. You know how Chris is.
Yeah, well, he
internet
lives
is.
out in the boondocks and
Yeah.
has spotty internet. So, was it Nancy? Nancy mentioned the other day that she mentioned generalization. Generalization is one of the things that blocks communication. That's all X, R, Y. Generalization is what gives us things like prejudice, bigotry, and all these other fun things. So it's also totally necessary to be able to generalize. Can you let him in, Noor?
Yeah, no problem. I already got
Thanks.
it.
Yeah. Another one is expansion that Louisa was mentioning. Do you know what you call continuous unbridled expansion?
Cancer.
Yes, cancer. And economic expansion, when it is, the purpose is insane. And this is an insanity that we find in our country here, is that we have this idea that we must always be expanding our economy. I didn't learn that people thought other ways until in my mid-20s, I moved to Stockholm for a year. And of course, any American who moves to Stockholm, the first thing that happens is they find a beautiful, intelligent Swedish girl to be their girlfriend. It's almost a natural law. And we were walking down the Queen Street one day, and she said, "Why are Americans so greedy?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she said, "You always want everything, more money, more this, more that." And she said, "Here in Sweden, we just want enough." And I was literally struck dumb for a moment. I had no answer to that because I thought about it, and it's like, yeah, I don't need it all. I just need enough. You know, the American dream is a mansion, a few $1 million in the bank, and a Ferrari. And according to my friend, the Swedish dream was a little cottage in the woods to go to when you have holidays.
Was she calling you out, or was she just speaking generally?
She was just speaking generally, and she was really good at bringing up things that I had not thought about before.
Oh, that's cool.
You know, we walked by a theater one day, and she said, "Why is it that in American movies you never have interracial couples as just a standard thing?" And it was
Took
like
a long time for that to happen.
Yeah, and I was sitting there going, guess who's coming to dinner? And nothing. So there were all of these things. Sweden was definitely, it was good for me. So anyway, other areas of degradation are discovered. You look around and you go, oh, that communication failed because of X. And they can oftentimes be put in the first 7, but sometimes they are their own categories. And so we have to remember that we don't know everything. And once we get to all of this, you get to point 9, which is you develop the ability to evaluate information for factualness by looking at these 7 errors and going, where am I making these errors? That's the first thing you do. You don't worry about anybody else first. You worry about yourself.
Always start with you.
Yeah. Where do I make these errors? I'm about to say something on Facebook. And then I go, okay, let's check and see, am I doing any of these things and am I doing them unconsciously? I will occasionally consciously do something just to stir shit. But if I'm doing it unconsciously, that's not worth anything. So that's what we are working towards, the ability to evaluate our information for factualness.
This is where we're getting into active information hygiene.
Yes.
Yeah.
Information hygiene is incredibly important in these days. But before we get into that, I want to look at the moving lines in the triangle. So, if you haven't listened to the video on the teachings of the classical Enneagram, excuse me, I highly recommend them. And I will even put links at the end of this video so you can find them. And that will help you if you don't understand everything that's going on here. But you can also ask me questions because it is my job to explain what I say to you, or it's Noor's job to explain what I say to you sometimes.
Sometimes. Or vice versa. You know how many times I've been like, Mushka, what am I trying to say?
All right, we look at point 1. And point 1 moves forward to 4, and it moves back to 7. So this line, these 2 moving lines inform what's going on in point 1. So the first error is partisanship towards a creed or opinion. That partisanship is developed from a mistaken presupposition about the truth. And it is informed by, or disinformed by, not understanding the natural transformations of society. So all partisans are misinformed about the truth. There is no such thing as partisan truth. Truth has no partisanship. The second error is overconfidence in one's sources. And that also looks to 4 that says, pay attention to your presuppositions. And it looks to 8, which is, what areas of degradation have you not discovered? And that's when you are looking at your sources, this is a really important line. So there are 3 kinds of certainty that you can have. In Arabic, certainty is yaqeen. And we say there is ilm al-yaqeen, ayn al-yaqeen, and haq al-yaqeen. The first of these, ilm means the certainty that is found through study and reading books of smart people and all of this kind of stuff. And if you're really good at it and you have really good sources, you can begin to approximate the truth. But all of these sources are liable to all of these errors, so you have to bear that in mind. You have the second, ayn al-yaqeen. Ayn literally means eye. And it is the certainty that you have from your direct personal experience. So somebody says, on planet Earth, the sky is green. And I walk out and I look up and I see that today the sky is blue where I'm standing, according to my eyeballs. That's my certainty. What I learned through direct experience is more powerful than what I can learn from a book or a scholar. The third area of certainty, haq. Haq is one of my favorite words. It means that which is real. It means the truth with a capital T, and it means God. It's one of the 99 names of God, is al-haq, the true, the truly real. And this is the certainty that one has from direct inspiration. And it's the most powerful certainty, but at the same time, it is the most dangerous certainty. Because while you may have true inspiration, you can also have false inspiration. For every time the divine reality whispers something in your ear, there are 1,000 times where your ego, pretending to be God, has whispered something in your ear. And you have to learn the discernment to tell one from the other. Three is the first shock point. To fail to understand what was intended by the originator of the information that you get is pretty major. And with this means that instead of staying in your own head, you have to bring in the originator into your circle. And that may mean that you have to question. You know, you might need to call somebody up at some university and go, what did you mean by this? It's a little scary, but I've done it. And sometimes you get interesting reactions.
Yeah, and it definitely avoids, you know, it helps you resolve the issue of misinterpretation or playing telephone, in the sense of sharing something that you think is true, but turns out to be some kind of shift in meaning between what you think it means and what was originally intended.
So when we get to 4 looks back to 1 and 2. And it says, if you have a mistaken presupposition about the truth, you look back to these and see if you have made any of these 2 errors, because they're going to be the most common. We move across the equator and we get to 5. 5 is the area of most work. And it is massively important to put any information, any knowledge you have into its real context. So you can't just go, oh, this fits what I already believe, so it must be it. You need to know the context of the information, or you don't know the information. 6 is the second shock. And this is the bigger of the 2 shocks. And we all fall prey to this. Because, I mean, if you're in a job, you can't just tell your boss that he's an idiot, because he has power over you and can fire you. And so we have to find ways around this. And this requires a little bit of surrender to the truth. At 7, once we get to 7 and we understand it, 7 travels back to 1. This is the end of the octave. And you take this understanding of the transformations of human society, and it starts a whole new cycle. So this is cyclical and spiral in nature.
That's a very important thing to understand when it comes to the Enneagram, because this is not just like a stagnant lap running.
Yeah.
This is movement.
Yep. And then the outcome of this is being able to see other areas of misinformation and degradation as they appear. And then we all live happily ever after. So this Enneagram I'm going to put up in the forum underneath the link to this video. So you'll all be able to download it.
And this is the kind of thing I think it's useful to utilize in everyday life. It's very practical. It's a good self-check-in, especially when we do a lot of our engagement right now during the pandemic, still within the virtual realm. And this is one way in which we can make those interactions more fruitful, more positive, more growth-oriented for us and for everyone that we interact with day to day.
So, questions, thoughts, queries, ponderances, judgments. Yes, we'll take them all.
May I jump in?
Yes, please.
Please. Yeah.
It's a question really, but it sparks off a number of other questions perhaps. But how can one tell the difference between inspired certainty that comes from, say, divineness, and inspired certainty that comes from an egotistical component? There are many people that would say the Prophet Muhammad and his message from Gabriel was not divine, but more demonic and egoic. And there are people that say obviously the opposite. So how would one, if I feel these voices and I experience something genuinely inspiring, how can I tell the difference?
That's a really good question. And part of the answer is Jesus said, by their fruits you will know them. Meaning, what outcomes does this produce? So with the Prophet Muhammad, you have to look at Meccan culture before him and after him. So one of the things that he instituted because of the message was universal literacy. You know, this is the first time in history that anybody suggested, hey, everybody should know how to read. He instituted, for as far as I know, the first time in history, ethical warfare. He said, look, you're going to have to go out and fight. Do not trouble non-combatants. Don't trouble the farmer in the field. Don't cut down or burn crops. Don't kill trees. Don't burn anything up. All of this kind of stuff. It was like the first time ever that I know of that anybody suggested that you didn't have to be a complete asshole to people when you went to war. He instituted rights for women. I consider Muhammad to be the first feminist in history. And I know that that will upset some people, but I nevertheless think so, because before him, women had no inheritance. After him, women had inheritance. Before him, women had no right to divorce. After him, they had right to divorce. All of these things. So you look at what he actually did, the fruits of his teachings, and they were good fruit. Now, yes, later on, other people came in. They messed things up. It was bad. We were very unhappy about that. And yet, in his time, what he was doing seems to have the stamp of divine approval, from my perspective.
Yeah, and I would argue that it set a trajectory. I think in some ways we could think of it as a a starting point on a path that he had provided. And we've been able to expand on that in a lot of cases. So
Yeah, another aspect is nobody's going to want to do what your divine inspiration says you should ought to do,
right.
because it's always
Yeah.
too hard.
Which
That's a
is
small
why
one.
Jesus had such trouble.
Yeah. But on a smaller level, does your inspiration create goodness around you, objective good? Or is it something that just feeds your ego? You know, we have, here in America, we love cults. We have lots of cults. We have every kind of cult you can think of. And a lot of them have been making the news lately. One of them is Nexium, which was a cult started by some guy. And on the surface,
marketing guy.
Yeah, on the surface, many aspects of it seemed good. Some of them were good. He never developed anything himself. He claimed to. But he got hold of some techniques that actually could produce some positive results. But underneath all of that, he was feeding his ego in every possible way. And we can tell that by, first of all, the crazy shit that he did. But second, even before we knew that he was basically creating a harem for himself, through nefarious methods.
Right. Yeah. Non-consensual.
Yeah.
Weird harem thing. Yeah.
Yep. Every time he talked, he pointed to himself. You know, I do this, I do that. I am the smartest guy in the world. He's have created all of it. Yeah, he's the great leader.
Self-referential.
And if it is coming from actual inspiration, you ain't going to do that. You aren't going to go, oh, I'm so special. You're going to go, hey, there's this cool thing that I discovered.
And there's an understanding, that it's much bigger than you are, even. Yeah. That it may not have anything to do with you as a personality at all. In fact, ideally not. So, yep. Does that help answer your question? Well, great, awesome. Good. So I also see that we have our two unmuted.
Yes, two people unmuted.
Yeah, at the same time. I had a thought about the bureaucracy filling all the niches before when you talked about that.
Yeah.
Can't help but thinking about giving up civil rights during pestilence times, and isn't bureaucracy having a field day right now? And are we ever going to stuff up again?
Yeah, bureaucracy is definitely having a field day. Some of what they're trying, I assume that most people try and do good. And some people just don't want to do good. There is always that. Some people just want to go for power and control.
How do you discern those two?
Say again?
How do you discern between those two?
Look at what they are speaking to and who they are speaking to. So we take, here in this country, we have Dr. Fauci, who is one of the world's best epidemiologists. And he gets on the news and says, you know, this plague is going to be around for a while, and you can do all of these things that will help you not get it and not die from it. Like, you can get vaccinated, you can wear a mask when you go out. He never says this should be mandated by law. But then you have Jim Jordan, who is a congressman and possible sex offender, who gets on and says, well, that's socialism or communism, or you're trying to force people to give up their rights and all of this kind of stuff. And Yeah, my point of view is that this is very Darwinistic. You know, the people who will take care of themselves and not get the plague are the ones who are not going to die, and the stupid people are going to die. They'll make a few new strains of COVID before they die, but that's going to happen pretty much anyway. But yes, bureaucracy will want to mandate this rather than educating people to choose what's right for them and what's right for the people around them, because it's not just about me wanting to wear a mask or not. I hate wearing masks. They suck.
Yeah.
But I will wear one in public because I am old and I'm decrepit, and if I get COVID, it's liable to kill me.
And you don't want to be a vector. I know.
Yeah, and we don't want to be a vector.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's empowering to give people the information without mandating their choice.
Yeah, but in order to have that happen, you need to have a fairly adult society. And the United States is not an adult society.
And that's why we find it so challenging to get productive things done if they aren't mandated. And it's why we are so reluctant to even suggest those things. I mean, as far as our politicians go, I'm not personally, but
yeah. The other thing, one of the ways that you can tell is how much do they use whatever they're saying for fundraising. So this
that's
Jordan, this Jordan guy will get, and he'll rail about all of these hot button issues, and then he'll say, and you can send me money and I will fight for you in Washington. And he'll raise millions of dollars. So far, I don't know that Fauci has ever asked anybody to send him money. So I take that into consideration.
And he's consistent. Yeah.
He's being fired by Trump.
Consistent. What's that, Rowan?
Being fired by Trump is a good sign as well.
Yes, that's definitely the case. Means he might have done his job. Funny, you've been so quiet and we have missed you for so long. Funny used to come to our talks all the time. And then she moved to the other side of the planet.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. I guess my reflection is that I have certainly visited these points myself, many of them, and sometimes for probably a decent amount of time. I think point 6 is a place I've spent a bit of time, and I can happily say that I haven't been there for a little bit.
Yay.
So that's cool. Yeah. But it's all, I think they're pretty clear because I've been looking into some critical thinking and logical fallacies and that sort of thing quite recently. So it makes sense, and it's good to refresh on it. So, yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Ibn Khaldun was one of the original critical thinkers, so that would make sense that that would work.
Cool. How about you, Neil? How's it going? What have you been thinking about?
Yeah, very good presentation. I'd a lot of things very evocative, provocative as well. Having been a former bureaucrat myself in state government in Queensland, I think a lot of us overestimate the competence of bureaucrats. But there is a law of expansion, of empire building within government departments. And I was an associate director at a very young age, and the game was to build your fiefdom, regardless of whether or not it had any practical use. The one that really got me, and I understand point 6, as Fanny mentioned, the desire to gain favour. Call that the ass kissing point. I've certainly expressed that a lot myself, being a bureaucrat back in the day, bowing and scraping when there's no real need for it, and it just muddies the waters when people need really good information. And you know, if you're the bearer of bad news, you're going to get shot. So
it's not fun.
You know,
right.
No, there's been times when I've decided not to take the bullet and bullshitted my way through when I should not have done that. But point 7 really got me thinking. Ignorance of the laws governing transforming of human society. And Nancy raised a good point that transforming doesn't necessarily mean a positive change in the form, structural shift. That's how I understand transformation, is structural shifts. You know, and Nancy said that it doesn't, I think it was Nancy that said it's not necessarily in a positive direction. It can be a devolution as well. And the you know, as an old Marxist, the first thought that came to my mind, and being an old Marxist takes me back to a number of the other points about getting things out of context and all the rest of it. But which predates the late humanist writers, economists like Marx and the others, to the religious traditions of, you know, morality being embedded in the material conditions of society and the material conditions of people's existence. I recall in Christianity, in the New Testament, there's some texts about, you know, people going to the pearly gates or whatever, and, you know, Lord, Lord, I have followed all the commandments, and saying, no, you have not looked after the weakest amongst you. Get away from me, I know you not, type of stuff. So it's not unique to the idea of morality being embedded in material conditions of life, and doing real practical work for the transformation of society. That was a thought that was rattling around. The other one was the laws governing the transforming of human society in positive directions. One of the ones that is recognized by the World Health Organization, the OECD, and others is a fundamental law. It's called the Emancipation of Women, or the empowerment of women broadly, wherever societies have, you know, taken the shackles off, not just women, but the feminine. There's been tremendous positive transformations of those societies. It seems something that under our, you know, our macho, patriarchal, power tripping, you know, bureaucratic approach to government, it seems a simple solution that we're not quite exploiting.
Yes,
that was my thought.
There are some interesting things around that. So,
Got it.
You got it. Here's something that will upset some people. Probably no one here, but for men, you will not reach human adulthood except insofar as you can interact at a level of equality with women. Women are what make us become adults. If society was left to men, we would still be in the trees. I kid you not. We have no need to be anywhere else. We'd be in the trees, we'd be picking apples or bananas or whatever we wanted, and there wouldn't be any kind of higher society because who cares? But if we interact with the feminine as the subject other, we mature. If we interact, and I'm just speaking for males right now, if we interact with the feminine as object, we remain children. And because I have knocked around the Middle East a fair bit, this is very, very apparent to me. I remember a friend, Pakistani guy. He was a neurosurgeon, brilliant at what he did, great research physician. And in that aspect of his life, he was brilliant. In all other aspects of his life, he had the emotional maturity of a 6-year-old. And it was really rather weird and sad to watch. So, insofar as we keep, and by we, I mean us men, insofar as we keep women locked away from us as equals, we turn off our own maturity.
And I agree with that to the extent that we have a long tradition of having a very clear understanding of women being women, men being men, women representing the feminine, men representing the masculine. And while I do think we're at a point where we're exploring more sophistication there, the fact remains that we are still functioning from that sense of stagnation. We are still putting things in these boxes and isolating them in such a way that we are cut off from the other. And in a patriarchal society, men are cut off from the feminine in a very intentional, structural way. And that becomes immensely problematic for the culture at large.
Yeah. It would be the same if it were reversed and men were chattel slaves and women ran everything.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
This is why that intersubjectivity is so important. There is that need for a meeting of things that enrich one another.
So there we have the radical thought for the day.
So we did have I know Weil sent this to me in a direct message, but I just want to offer it up. Like, where can we find a list of the laws of transforming society?
Look in Ibn Khaldun's work. That's a good place to start.
Good, great.
And we'll probably have to do a talk about that sometime too.
Yeah, I think we should make note of that and think ahead about doing that. And we will reference back to this talk, I'm sure, when we do get to that.
Yeah, we have gone way over time.
We have, but this was an important subject. Thank you so much.
And it's our first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to switch our view back over to Brady Bunch mode.
Good, yay.
So we can all see all of us.
And we'll get the chance to wave to everyone who's watching the replay.
Yeah. Yep. So any last questions before we call it a morning or an evening?
I had a thought.
Yeah, please.
Yes, please.
I thought that at point 6, we kind of do this for everyone we don't want to upset or we don't want to get in trouble with. So we often don't tell the truth or perceive the truth.
Oh, yes.
Not only for people in higher ranks, basically for everyone.
Yep. Yeah, the moment you ask your partner, do I look good in this?
Does this dress make me look fat? And then there's no,
yeah, it doesn't have to be the dress because guys are as vulnerable to that as women are.
It's true. And that's one thing related to the more sophisticated view on gender that I was mentioning. Yep. We all have those vulnerable spots inside of us. Yep.
Yeah, so that's an extremely good point because all of us will want to alter the truth just a little bit so that we're liked by the people we talk to.
Yeah. Yep. It's a dance. I mean, it is important to tell the truth, but as I was saying earlier, sometimes the way we share it makes a difference. And sometimes there's a purposefulness to giving someone a shock of truth, to, you know, give them that verbal, wake up, this is what's actually happening. And then other times it's good to give them like a, I don't want to say diplomatic per se, because I feel like that has the connotation of being too easygoing or too constructed and curated and all that. But people don't always hear things when we say them in a painful way. Sometimes they don't hear them if we say them in a nice way. This is where skill comes into play. And we can try to use what we call right action. A lot of times what this means is taking a look at the circumstances, taking a look at the context of the person in their life, in their relationship to you, taking all of that into consideration, and also committing to sharing with them the truth, however they are able to receive it.
Yeah. So, show of hands. Who thinks that we're crazy?
I do. It's okay.
Good, because you're right.
All right, so we should wrap it up. We have kept you guys for an hour and a half, and we really appreciate you making this time for us. And we look forward to having you guys with us again.
And again, and again.
And hopefully again, yeah. Like we said, we're going to do this every third Sunday of the month. If we get the ball rolling well enough that we feel we can keep up with the content production on our end in terms of coming up with ideas to talk about, materials for us to share with you like we did today with the Enneagram, maybe we can do more weekends per month, but we just need to keep this manageable for us. And it's so exciting to see that there's interest here. That means a lot to us.
And we're always available on the forum. If you have a question, we have an answer. If we don't have the answer, we will make something up that sounds plausible.
Yep. Or we'll say, I don't know, what do you think? Yeah. All right, everyone, why don't we wave to everyone watching on YouTube and say goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
You can unmute yourselves too, by the way, if you want to do that.